Opening 8 seconds. Thousands of knights, in the most advanced armor ever built, were massacred by men wearing almost nothing. Not because the armor failed, because nobody told the knights what was actually killing them. The lie everyone believes. Most people assume the knight disappeared because someone finally built a weapon good enough to cut through plate armor. That is the logical assumption, and it is almost completely wrong. The real story is stranger, and far more embarrassing for the most expensive military force in medieval history. But to understand what actually killed the knights, you first need to understand why the armor became so good in the first place, because the two things are directly connected. The sword that changed its mind. Early armor was chainmail, thousands of interlocking iron rings that did one specific job with extraordinary efficiency, stopping a slashing blade. A sword drawn across the body, a cut catching the arm or shoulder. The rings absorbed it, redistributed the force, and the man underneath survived. So the sword faced a simple problem. It was built to cut, and cutting no longer worked. The response was not to make a bigger sword. The response was to make a smarter one. Smiths began pulling the blade geometry toward the point, narrowing the profile, concentrating mass where it could do something the slash could not, penetrate. A wide blade says, "I will cut through you." A narrow blade says, "I will find the place where you end." And the gaps existed because chainmail opened every time the body moved. The elbow bent, the shoulder rotated, the knee lifted, and in each movement a small window appeared. A trained fighter could grip his own blade with a gauntlet hand, drive the point into the visor, the armpit, the back of the knee, with surgical control. The sword had solved the problem, and it was winning again. But here is where the first surprise lands. The armor that made everything worse. Within roughly a century and a half, European smiths produced something that made the sword's solution almost irrelevant. Full plate armor. Not heavier chainmail. A completely different category of protection. The surface curved deliberately so that blades deflected rather than bit. The joints overlapped in ways that moved with the body while covering every gap. The visor narrowed the face to near invisibility without removing enough air to affect combat performance. A fully armored knight in well-fitted plate was so difficult to kill with a sword that the weapons dominating the battlefield were no longer swords at all. They were warhammers, poleaxes, and short rondel daggers, weapons that did not try to cut through armor but instead drove force through it, breaking bones underneath without touching a single plate. The sword had been effectively removed from the anti-armor equation. And here is the problem with that. The knight should have been safer than ever. The armor was better. The tactical thinking around armored cavalry was sophisticated. The investment in training was generational. And yet, the knights were dying in numbers that make modern historians stop and reread the sources. Thousands, sometimes in a single afternoon. Not killed by superior armor. Not killed by the perfect anti-armor weapon. Killed by farmers with pole weapons, and by English archers shooting at completely the wrong target. The first twist. Farmers who broke the system. The Swiss infantry of the 14th and 15th centuries owned no plate, rode no horses, and spent nothing close to what a single suit of armor cost on their entire weapons inventory. Their primary weapon was the halberd, an axe combined with a spike and a hook on a 6-foot pole. It cost almost nothing. It required far less training than a mounted knight. And in the right hands, against the right conditions, it was catastrophic. But the halberd alone did not break the knights. What broke the knights was the question the Swiss were asking. Every other army was asking, how do we beat the armor? The Swiss were asking something different. How do we beat the conditions that make the armor work? And those are two completely different problems with two completely different answers. The Swiss moved in dense formations that cavalry could not easily scatter, and they moved fast, aggressively forward, closing distance before the armored horses could establish the momentum that made them lethal. Get inside that momentum, and the knight becomes a very expensive man standing in a very heavy suit with nowhere to move. The hook on the halberd pulled riders off their horses. The axe shattered plate at the right angle. The spike found gaps. But the real weapon was the positioning, the terrain choice, the denial of space. The afternoon everything changed. In 1315, a Swiss force ambushed a column of Austrian knights along a narrow lakeside path between a steep hill and a body of water. The knights could not charge, could not maneuver, could not form, could not fight as anything other than men standing in a line waiting to be reached. Everything that made a knight dangerous, the horse, the momentum, the formation, the coordinated charge, was neutralized before a single blow landed. The Swiss came down from the high ground and dismantled them. Hundreds of the finest armored warriors in Europe died that afternoon, and the Swiss lost almost nobody. Not because anyone broke through the armor, but because nobody needed to. The armor had already been made irrelevant by the geography before the battle started. This was not a lucky ambush. It was a proof of concept, and it was copied, refined, and repeated at scale across Europe over the next 2 centuries. Part 2. The second twist. The longbow was aiming at the wrong target. At Crécy in 1346, the English longbow did not win the battle by punching through plate armor. This is one of the most persistent myths in medieval military history, and it is largely false. The longbow at distance could not reliably penetrate well-made plate. The steel was good enough, the angle too unpredictable, the energy lost over range too significant. So how did the French lose thousands of knights in a single afternoon to English archers? The archers were not shooting at the knights. They were shooting at the horses. A warhorse carries far less armor than its rider. The great destriers of the period had protection at the face and chest, but nothing approaching full human coverage. And a horse struck by arrows, even without dying immediately, becomes uncontrollable. A panicked warhorse at full speed, veering and screaming under its rider, is not a weapon anymore. It is a catastrophe moving toward everyone around it. A charge of armored cavalry that breaks formation because the horses are panicking is no longer a charge. It is a crowd of extremely heavy men losing balance at speed. And once they were on the ground, English soldiers moved through the wreckage with short blades and simple tools, ending the fight in the most direct way possible. The battle was not decided by a weapon that defeated armor. It was decided by a weapon that defeated the vehicle carrying the armor. The knight was not killed. The knight was dismounted, and dismounting was enough. The detail Agincourt reveals that nobody talks about. Agincourt in 1415 is where the logic becomes physically undeniable. Henry V chose a recently plowed field after days of rain, positioned his archers on firm ground between 2 patches of woodland, and waited. The French had no tactical option except to come to him. Across ankle-deep mud, in full plate, in October. Here is the specific detail that changes how you see the whole battle. Plate armor weighs between 45 and 60 pounds. When you are standing still on firm ground, that weight is distributed and manageable. When you are walking 400 yards through mud in it, your oxygen debt compounds at a rate that is nearly impossible to recover from mid-fight. By the time the French reached the English line, they were already at 60 or 70% of their physical capacity. Legs burning, breathing restricted by the visor, arms heavier than they should be, reaction time just slightly, catastrophically, slower than the men waiting for them. The English had not moved. They were rested, dry, standing exactly where they chose to stand. Henry did not win Agincourt with better weapons. He won it with a field and the patience to make the enemy cross it. The French lost thousands of knights that afternoon, and when Henry ordered the prisoners killed mid-battle, a decision that troubled people then and still troubles historians now, it was because so many armored men had simply fallen and could not rise, that the English did not have enough soldiers to guard them all. The armor had not failed. The man inside it had been made to fail by the conditions the armor could not change. The answer the title was holding back. The knight died not because the arms race was lost. The arms race between swords and armor was real, technically extraordinary, and produced genuine marvels of medieval engineering on both sides. But that race was not the thing that ended the night. What ended the night was simpler and more brutal. The enemies who mattered most stopped competing in the arms race entirely and started competing in terrain, in timing, in the management of oxygen and mud and momentum. The Swiss did not out-armor the knights. They took away the ground the knights needed to fight on. The English did not outsword them. They took away the horses that carried the armor into range. Henry at Agincourt did not outtrain them. He made them walk until the training no longer mattered. Every single massacre followed the same pattern. Find the assumption buried inside the strength, and break the assumption, not the armor. The armor was extraordinary. The men wearing it were extraordinary. And none of that saved them from mud. What this means for you right now. There is a direct line from Morgarten in 1315 to how the most decisive competitive advantages collapse in almost any field today. The pattern is always the same. The dominant side optimizes within the system. The side that wins changes the system. The knight optimized for centuries and was destroyed by men who refused to play the same game. If you want to see the next time this exact pattern ended an era that looked permanent, the video is linked right now. It involves a completely different century, a completely different kind of army, and a weapon so simple that the side it destroyed never saw it coming. Click it, because the ending of that story is even harder to believe than this one. And if this video changed how you think about armor, about weapons, or about how advantages actually collapse, subscribing takes 3 seconds, and the next video pays it back immediately.